let's turn to some international news now, with several countries, including Australia, pulling their funding to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees after several of its employees were accused of being involved in the October 7 terrorist attacks. Now, the agency has since fired several staff after these allegations came to light, and the UN has vowed to carry out an independent review of the organisation. But it's not the first time, Caroline, that staff of this mob, the UNRWA, have been caught up in allegations of either sympathy or involvement in October 7. You had a bunch of teachers who were involved in this outfit that teach kids in Palestine, Gaza, etc., had put stuff on social media after the attacks, celebrating it, saying it was the right thing, etc. Why didn't we just pull our money then?
We should have, frankly, pulled our money years ago, as many of the UN watchdog groups have pointed out, because it has been years of evidence that this outfit, which receives foreign aid from Australia as well as many countries around the world, the US has been its biggest bilateral donor, especially after Biden restored the funding that Trump had pulled, has been teaching children, Palestinian children, to hate Israelis and Jews and to grow up wanting to be a martyr. That has been part of the curriculum at these schools, as has been uncovered time and time again. There have been numerous reports of funding that was meant to go there being squandered and being taken by Hamas, and the United Nations keeping quiet about it, not really reporting it or just keeping it shut up. This bunch of teachers that supported October 7, that was a Telegram group of 3,000 staff and teachers from UNRWA, many of whom, overwhelming amounts of messages of support. Of course, I'm not suggesting that all are about this and that many don't, or the majority even don't, genuinely have the interests of the Palestinian people at heart. And there needs to be, of course, support and humanitarian aid. But when Israel provides evidence that there is infrastructure and tunnels underneath these UN facilities in which Hamas uses to carry out its operations, when Israel says that there are 12 staff that it know of that were part of the worst attack on Israel in its history and the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, people need to wake up. And it's enough. No, Australia has, Penny Wong has very sensibly said there will be a temporary pause in funding, but I think the funding situation needs to be completely reviewed. Yeah, it needs to be paused.
Because obviously there's no suggestion that the organisation itself is responsible for these people, but they employ them.
They are responsible for these people. Right? Of course they're responsible for them.
No. What I mean is it's not the UNRWA that's saying we support Hamas, but their staff do, and if they are carrying out work, Paul, for them, then they have every right to be sacked. And we have every right to say, well, we're not contributing to the $1.6 billion you receive every year.
Well, there's a fundamental philosophical issue here about whether you think the UN is the great arbiter in the middle with the heart of gold that's got people at every level of it that are pure as all of that garbage. I'm not quite one of them because apart from this story, there are other stories about aid agencies and sexual assaults and all terrible things that have happened in relation to the people who end up doing some of the grunt work. Now, obviously, in case you're about to run off to the umpire, listen to the whole statement. Obviously, the assumption is that most people who end up doing that sort of stuff are good and decent people. But my issue is that if the Australian government, and this is the whole question around foreign aid, right, which is that when you give it, do we have any capacity to follow where that money ends up? Do we know that $1 million or $1, where does it end up? Which is why my position is more so to support things like the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders or some sort of...
The same Red Cross that didn't go in to help any hostages that Hamas took? That Red Cross?
First I've heard of it, not disrespecting the point. But I'm saying is that when you're looking around as an international citizen and you say, I see a problem on the other side of the world, right? Be it this particular conflict or be it tsunamis or be it something that happens in parts of the global south, third world, of course, is what we would talk to. Then you do have to have, as part of our giving of money, the capacity to trace it. If you can't trace it, then don't give it. So that's my suggestion is that we should and I do like the term temporary pause, just as a little sort of a little callback to previous suggestions. Those Kel Richards and the wordsmiths will be paying attention. But I think that there should be more pressure on Australia at all times, at all levels, to make sure where our money goes is going.
I think that the money itself, I don't think is. I mean, of course, we shouldn't be giving our money to these questionable organisations, but it's almost secondary. I think the real issue, and this is something I know a lot of people have been saying, I've certainly been saying since it broke out, that it is. This is why the idea that there is this sort of great, solid, imaginary line dividing Hamas from everyone else in Palestine is a complete and utter fantasy. It is, and you have a population that has been incredibly heavily indoctrinated, notwithstanding the fact that a decade and a half ago they actually voted Hamas in, and there are fears that if there was an election in the West Bank, Hamas would be elected there as well. And again, you can understand if you've got a terrorist organisation running an autocratic government which has banned elections ever since and is bombarding the citizens with propaganda, you are going to end up thinking like that. But this is the point. The point is that the line between activist, or in this case even aid worker, and actual terrorist or terrorist sympathiser is very, very vague.
Yeah.
It is often constantly fluid, and I just find it passing strange that nonetheless you have the darlings of the left, the supposed intelligentsia, the vast majority of academia even. These are people who, call themselves doctors and professors and whatnot, who pride themselves on being super politically aware, except everything that Hamas says, everything the UN says, completely and utterly without question, and yet says that, a democratic government like Israel should be subjected to the same amount of rigour as Hamas, a prescribed terrorist organisation, and indeed that, that there is this equivalency simply because, and I can't think of any other reason for it, but simply because Israel is just the new Vietnam. It's just the new war du jour for, again, the upper middle class intelligentsia to oppose and march up and down about it. It's not, it's not Rwanda, it's not the Yemenis, it's not, any of the other countless conflicts going on. And we talked about the communists and the Nazis before. Let's not forget, they were in cahoots.
Yeah,
they were in alliance. They invaded Poland together.
Of course, and I think there's a sympathy.
Sort of
there's a sympathy as well for the sort of anti-Western element of it.